Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on this upcoming DC universe, and I guess more specifically, The Flash. And as we know, we don't have a specific Flash-related project set for development, at least publicly, within this new DC universe reboot coming our way under the creative control of James Gunn. Of course, that's starting with Superman in, what, a handful of months from now in the middle of July? But the character is, of course, it's just too big of a character and property within the DC mythos to not be used at some point. I don't want to say sooner rather than later, but at least, not too late into the, into the universe reboot. One of the big things with it is just the question of when, when this comes about and who will be involved. Not on the creative side, but in regards to the actors involved, but also what specific version of the character is used when it comes to the Flash. One of the big debates when it comes to the Flash in this new DC universe is the age-old question of Barry or Wally. So in this video, I thought we'd go over the top casting choices from fans for two versions of each of Barry and Wally. So for Barry, I'm going to put a couple fan casts for a Barry in his 30s, which would be your prime Barry Allen Flash, as well as a couple of castings for a Barry around his 40s, which opens the door for a more experienced and wise version. And for Wally, as you'd expect, I am going to mention the casting around Kid Flash, his teenage version, as well as the version of Wally once he is the Flash in his 20s or maybe 30s. We don't know what the canon of this DC universe will be or currently is when it comes to the Flash and the characters involved in that side of things. But the castings for that older Wally could easily still pull off a mid-20s Wally if needed, as well as one entering his 30s as well if needed. But yeah, these are the top ones online for the respective options. You might disagree with them. There's some here which, of course, are just talked about so much they get a bit grinding whenever you hear them brought up again, but they are still the top option, so you got to respect what people think. So we'll just list them and then go over them and give opinions and stuff like that. So does that sound good? Hopefully it does, because if it does, awesome, let's go. But of course, let me know your opinions in the comment section down below in regards to these casting, all these fan casts, might I say, as well as any additions you have. You might be like, hey, I have one for Barry that you're not mentioning. Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video, drop a like. It takes 2 seconds. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the Barry castings in his, the Barry castings as a whole, but starting with the 30s options. Now, the thing is, people might be like, well, hold on, what about the 20s? Well, for me, Barry is always someone that gets his powers like in his late 20s, early 30s. Like he is already a forensic scientist, is already like a career guy, and he's just a regular guy going to work, and then this happens. I don't think it can work when he's in his 20s. Like the Flash show did that, but that whole thing was that he reverse Flash made it that he got it earlier. So I would prefer in the movies if maybe he got them when he's like 28, 29, and we pick up with him when he's a few years later down the track and has gotten a bit more experience with the powers. I don't think we need another origin story with the character. So for his 30s, the fan cast that's at the top 2 that I like the most, and it's one where even if it wasn't necessarily one of the top ones, I would still go, hey, that's a good casting, and that's George Mackay. I think it just fits that he'd do it very well. He has the look as well, and he's not someone where I think people are just looking at one specific performance and going, oh, he just does that, but as the Flash. I think people are just looking at him as an actor and what he can do with the character and the bit of a difference factor he could put in there. So he's one of the top 2. He's the one I like the most. That's why I mentioned him first. But the second is the most prevalent one, but the one that's been around for I think closer to a decade than like 5 years or 4 years or something like that. I think this has been like a fan cast for the past 6 to 8 years or something like that, and that's Lucas Till. I don't hate this. It's just one of those ones that's very similar to like the the Charlie Hunnam Green Arrow one, where you just hear it so many times, and it's also people that maybe aren't even fans of the character just say this because they just put like someone does like a Photoshop of him in a Flash suit and stuff like that. And also people do pick the thing from MacGyver, is it? Or whatever the show he was in MacGyver, the Reboot MacGyver, and they just go, well, just do that, but as the Flash. Look, if he got cast, I wouldn't like tear the walls down, but it's also one where I'm like, I don't really care if he got it or not. It's just not a top option for me. But in the 40s, here's probably like 2 interesting ones. And I was sort of surprised that these were some of the 2 top ones I found. There was technically probably like 2 other ones. People mentioned Ryan Gosling and stuff like that. But I picked 2 that I thought seemed realistic in regards to potentially happening. And I think they would actually do a good job. And yeah, I just think it would work as a 40, not a 1940s, but a Barry in his 40s. And both of these actors are in their 40s. So the first one is Chris Pine. Now, I put him here specifically because he was the top choice to play Barry back when they were doing a Flash movie, I think in like the late 2000s or something like that. And then of course there was, I think Ryan Reynolds was one that they were going to do when, oh, Ryan Reynolds was up for it at one point as well. And then I think that went quiet, and then they did the Green Lantern movie. And then I think Chris Pine's name came back into it, and he was going to play Barry Allen in that universe in that Green Lantern film. So Chris Pine, I think it'd be like a bit of like a throwback and a bit of like a, you know, head, like a nod to that potential casting from back in the day if he got cast as a Barry in his 40s, especially if he wasn't maybe a main player in this DC universe and it was more of just a supporting role within the universe as a whole, but also whatever else is going on in the Flash sort of world at that point as well. So I think Chris Pine would be a fun choice. The only issue is that of course he played Steve Trevor in the DCEU, but I think he would take up playing a different character rather than just reprising Steve Trevor, because there's not much to that character, you know? And the second pick for a Barry in his 40s is Andrew Garfield. Now, this is one I actually didn't think of just because I didn't realize Andrew Garfield was in his 40s. He's like, I think he's 41 going on 42. I just thought he was like mid to late 30s for some reason. But I think he'd work pretty well as a Barry in his 40s. I think it's actually it's just one of those things like, you know, would he play Spider-Man and then go play the Flash? Because a lot of people that like Spider-Man like the Flash. It's a very big crossover, or like a Vex diagram thing where they sort of meet in the middle with those two characters. But that might be a reason why it works and why people think this is a good choice. So yeah, I didn't realize he was in his 40s. So he was actually sort of a late mention here. There might have been someone else that was put here if I didn't realize he was already in his 40s and sort of fits that as well. So I could see him playing that. So I think it's a good choice. But now we get into the Wally casting. So of course this is going to be broken down into a Kid Flash version and then an older slash just, you know, he's the Flash version. And with the Kid Flash stuff, it's maybe a bit of a disappointing one here because I didn't list anyone. And you might be like, what are you doing, you idiot? Like, put unknown talent. And the reason I said that is because the most popular Kid Flash casting as like a teenage character and all that was Kit Connor, from what I could see. Very like above and beyond anyone else. But at this point in time, he has probably already aged out of the role. I think he's 19, 20 or something like that, let alone in a few years' time when they might start casting. He'd be in his mid-20s potentially. So my bet would be an unknown actor that would get the Kid Flash version of Wally West if they do it. Maybe it might be their first proper role, or at least the first one where there's like any attention to it. Or maybe it's someone that's still unknown right now and is about to break out in the years to come. So someone that's maybe like around 12 years old or something, 12, 13, something at this time. That's who I would expect to be cast as Kid Flash. Now, of course, there's that Teen Titans film that's coming out, but all the rumors suggest that Kid Flash will not be a part of that, and it's going to be from the TV roster of like, you know, Robin, Cyborg, Raven, Starfire, Beast Boy. That's the group. No Kid Flash, no Wonder Girl or anything like that. So yeah, I'd assume it's going to be an unknown talent. I think it's sort of pointless wasting the time trying to think out a Kid Flash casting, because the person who's probably going to get it is probably 11 or 12 and playing Fortnite at the moment. And of course, the final thing to talk about is Wally as the Flash. So this is someone, he could be in his 20s, he could be in his 30s. I'd probably aim for like, if we pick up in this DC universe and Wally is the Flash, I would expect that he's around mid-20s, late 20s at the most, or something around that. I think that's probably what they would go for. And these are the two. I think there was probably a lot of mixture around there. There's probably like 4 that I could have mentioned, but I wanted to break it down to like 2 legitimate options per thing when discussing it. The first one is one that was talked about a lot, especially as of recent, and that is Jack Quaid, who of course is in The Boys. He voices Superman in the animated show, and amongst other things as well. And as like a mid-20s to late 20s Wally, I think he's actually a really good fit. I saw people like casting him as like other characters in the DCU, even as like a Barry Allen, but I think him as a Wally West is actually pretty good. Now, both of my options aren't redheads, but at the end of the day, like, I mean, he's in the suit and stuff like that. I mean, if they really wanted to, they could dye his hair red, but I don't think they're going to go out of the way. I mean, you look at the guy who's playing like Jimmy Olsen in the Superman movie. I don't think he has red hair. It's just like light brown or something like that. So I don't think people necessarily care too much when it comes to the hair color specifically. But I think Jack Quaid's a pretty damn good option, to be completely honest. But the second one I think is interesting just because of how it could be maybe a bit different than what you'd expect, but also still play into what you'd expect from Wally. And that's Joe Keery, who of course plays Steve Harrington in Stranger Things. Of course, that show's come to an end, so I'm sure he's probably looking for another big thing, or if he wants that, another big acting thing. But I think he'd be a pretty good fit for it as well. It just would be interesting to like a bit different to see him in there. I think most people can imagine easily Jack Quaid jumping in and being a Wally West, or being the Flash and stuff like that. I don't think it probably differs from too much from other stuff we've seen from him. But maybe with Joe Keery jumping in there, it might be a bit of a departure point. But I think it'd work. And I think that's the thing when you cast stuff. You don't want to do stuff that's so like basic, and you just go, oh, they're just going to be playing this character they already played previously, but with a Flash suit on, like people do with like Lucas Till, as I mentioned earlier. You want it to be, a bit exciting when you see them play that role. And I think that's what makes some of these castings come about is exciting. It's like, oh, I never thought they would play it. Like when you look at Robert Pattinson playing Batman, who would have thought that 10 years ago? So yeah, I mean that's always an interesting thing when it comes to casting. I mean, where the Joe Keery thing becomes like almost like very enticing. But I think out of those two, if you're just going to decide today and you wanted to get the movie done, as smoothly as possible, you'd probably pick Jack Quaid out of those two, just because I think he fits it just in like fits it easiest in regards to like a transitional period. But I think both of those options are pretty solid, and they were two of the top like 3 or 4 fan casts that I saw online. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on everything we went over this video. What are your thoughts on all of these? Do you have any other casting options to add? Or do you have any opinions on the ones that we went over? Always curious to read what you guys are thinking. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, takes 2 seconds. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.